So today we are starting this new section about Kapila Dev and Kardam Muni, and Kardam Muni and Devahuti, who who have a child. The one sec, just one sec. Yeah, so we are starting this new section today from the third canto. So this is a very beautiful section, a very long section actually, but it is considered very, very powerful in terms of the wisdom that is being given through these chapters. So today we are going through the first chapter of this section, which is the conversation between Manu and Kardama Muni. So there's a background to this, of course, that so actually the third this chapter comes in the third canto. This is the 21st chapter, and the initial chapters they talk about various things. An important one among them being the killing of Varahadev. And another significant thing that I found was third canto, first chapter is where Vidura enters the scene. Like I don't, he might have been mentioned in the first and second canto, but in the third canto, first chapter is where he comes in the picture, and then that conversational context between Vidura and Maitreya begins in the third canto. So what happens is Vidura is actually a very great soul. So I just wanted to talk about Vidura a little bit before we get into the actual chapter today. So Vidura's birth is very interesting. So he was he was a pure devotee of Krishna, of course, and there is a story, the story of his birth. So it so happens that Vichitravirya, who was the prince in the Kuru dynasty that time. So Vichitravirya is actually the father of uh, uh, Dhritarashtra and Pandu. Actually, he was supposed to be the father of Dhritarashtra and Pandu, but there are certain things that happen. So Shakuntala is the queen. She's like the Shantanu's wife. So Shantanu King Prithu, please, Amma, please. Sorry, I'm just a little flustered because Prithu is here. Um, King Shantanu was a very great ruler, and one of his sons was, of course, Bhishma Dev with Ganga Devi. And then he had another wife called Shakuntala. And with Shakuntala, he had two sons actually, Vichitravirya and Chitrangada. So Chitrangada, it is said that he gets killed or something. And then Vichitravirya also, both of these kids, they are not very capable. I think that's what's mentioned. At least Vichitravirya is not. And then somehow Shakuntala gets him married to married to who were the two wives of Vichitravirya? I forget now.
Ambalika, Ambika.
Yeah, Ambika and Ambalika. Sorry, yeah. So Ambika and Ambalika were the two wives of Vichitravirya, who actually he also did not win them in Swayamvar. Bhishma Pitama actually did that for him. And then, but then Vichitravirya again, he gets into trouble, he gets killed. But then now there is no king. There is no king to rule the kingdom. So now this is a very big question. You have Bhishma who is very much capable of ruling the kingdom, but he's taken this vow of not becoming the king ever, based on Shakuntala's selfish motive. So then he can't be the king. Then who will be the king? So they need a then Uttaradhikari, so to say. And then Vichitravirya doesn't have kids till by then. So then what happens is after he dies, Shakuntala decides that okay, since Vichitravirya doesn't have any kids, I have to somehow make sure that the kingdom gets a heir. And so then she says, okay, we'll call Vyasa. So Vyasa is actually the brother of Vichitravirya, because um, Vyasa was born of Shakuntala and Parashar Muni, another great sage. So before Shakuntala married Shantanu, she had an affair with Parashar Muni, out of which Vedavyas was born. Now Vedavyas is the great soul, but at the same time he's a great sage also. He's doing tapasya. So when he comes, he Ambika and Ambalika, they so the aim is that Vedavyas has to beget children through them. But then when Ambika is sent, I mean Vedavyas is sent to Ambika to beget children. She sees she sees Vyasdev, and she gets so afraid that she closes her eyes. And because she closes her eyes, the kid that was born out of that union was blind, and that is none other than Dhritarashtra. And then Ambalika, what happens is she also goes, and I mean, she's also supposed to unite with Vedavyas, but then as soon as she sees Vedavyas, she sees his not ghastly, but his, in one sense, emaciated form because of doing tapasya and all that, and she becomes afraid. So that union happens in a state of being afraid for Ambalika. And then because of that, the child that is born out of that union was Pandu, who was pale. Like he looked as if he was afraid. He was pale. That's what the Mahabharata says. And then finally, what happens is I think before Ambalika, what Ambalika does is before she goes to unite with Vedavyas, she wants to avoid that. So then she sends a maid servant in her place. Now, this maid servant, although she was a maid servant, she knew the etiquette of welcoming sages. And that is why when she sees Vedavyas, who is a great sage, she welcomes him nicely and, gives him a nice reception. And then they unite. And from that union, who was born was Vidura. So now Vidura is actually, he's good in all respects. But then, and plus he's a great devotee of the Lord, being born of a great father and mother. But then he is actually born of a Shudra. He's born of a maid servant. So because of that, he faces insults throughout his life. So he is a very great ruler. He's not. So please, Amma. Huh? Please. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂತ್ ಕೇಳಲ್ಲ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂತ್ ಕೇಳ ಅಮ್ಮನ್ ಜೋಡಿ. So ಚಂದಾಗರೆ ಕೂಡ್ ಮತ್ತ ಚಂದಾಗ ಕೂಡ್ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿ ನನ್ನ ಶರ್ಟ್ ಹರಿಲಿಗತ್ತಿ. So he's not a ruler, but he's like an advisor to the king that time. But he's a very righteous person, and he's a very great devotee of the Lord as well. And he knows the shastras. He knows the what is right and wrong and things like that. So then he Prithu Chanda Kudama. So then, but because he's the son of a Dasi, he's insulted all throughout his life, despite him being a great person, right? So that is Vidura. Now, another story is, this the soul Vidura, how that happened to be. So this is one, I mean, Mahabharata story is one story of how he was born. The other story is that this happens in the Yamaloka. So Yamaraj once he's supposed to give punishment to this Muni called Mandukya Muni. So what this Mandukya Muni had done was he was once attacked by dacoits, and those dacoits, they were about to like kill him by piercing him with arrows, but then it's like they were about to kill him, but something happens and they don't kill him. And while they were about to kill him, this Muni became very afraid. He was in a state of extreme fear, right? And then what happens is that causes a trauma for him apparently. So after his, he goes to, after this episode, he goes to Yamaraj and he complains to Yamaraj, "Hey, what is this? What did I do to deserve this state of thing? This incident in my life?" this state of extreme fear. Then Yamaraj tells him that, look, when you were a kid, you actually pierced some insects, some ants that were, going harmlessly on the ground. You took a stick and you pierced those ants and killed them. And that is this is the reaction for doing that activity that you did. But because you were a child when you did it, I gave you a concession. And the concession was that you didn't have to be pierced literally by arrows, but you went through the fear of being pierced by arrows. So that was the concession. You didn't literally get pierced by arrows. But then Mandukya Muni says, no, 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 your system is unfair. This is not the right analysis. I curse you, he says. So Mandukya Muni curses Yamaraj to fall down to the earth and to get a low birth. And that is none other than Vidura. So Vidura is considered as in Amsha of Yamaraj. So because Yamaraj is a pure devotee, Vidura being his Amsha is also like a pure devotee of the Lord. So that is about Vidura, right? So Vidura is one great personality that comes in this canto, and I thought we can glorify him before we get into the actual contents of the chapter. So anyway, so that was about Vidura. Now we'll begin the actual chapter. So just one sec. Okay, Krishnan Prabhu. So we have 56 verses in this. So let's do 14 verses each.
14. Okay, Prabhu. And text 1, Vidura said, the line of Swayambhuva Manu was most esteemed. O worshipful sage, I beg you, give me an account of this race whose progeny multiplied through sexual intercourse. The two sons of Swayambhuva Manu, Priyavarta and Uttanapada, ruled the world, consisting of 7 islands, just according to religious principles. O holy Brahmana, O sinless one, you have spoken of his daughter, known by the name Devahuti, as the wife of the sage Kardama, the lord of created beings. How many offsprings did the great yogi beget through the princess, who was endowed with eightfold perfection in yogic principles? Oh, pray, tell me this. I am eager to hear this. O holy sage, tell me how the worshipful Ruchi and Daksha, the son of Brahma, generated children after securing as their wives the other 2 daughters of Swayambhuva Manu. The great sage Maitreya replied, commanded by Lord Brahma to beget children in the worlds, the worshipful Kardama Muni practiced penance on the bank of river Saraswati for a period of 10,000 years. During that period of penance, the sage Kardama, by worship through devotional service and trance, propitiated the personality of Godhead, who is the quick bestower of all blessings upon those who flee to him for protection. Then, in the Satya Yuga, the lotus-eyed Supreme Personality of Godhead, being pleased, showed himself to that Kardama Muni and displayed his transcendental form, which can be understood only through the Vedas. Kardama Muni saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is free from material contamination, in his eternal form, effulgent like the sun, wearing a garland of white lotuses and water lilies. The Lord was clad in spotless yellow silk, and his lotus face was fringed with slick dark locks of curly hair. Adorned with crown and earrings, he had his characteristic conch, characteristic conch, disc and mace in 3 of his hands, and a white lily in the 4th. He glanced about in a happy, smiling mood, whose sight captivates the hearts of all devotees. A golden streak on his chest, the famous Kaustuba gem suspended from his neck. He stood in the air with his lotus feet placed on the shoulders of Garuda. When Kardama Muni actually realized the Supreme Personality of Godhead in person, he was greatly satisfied because his transcendental desire was fulfilled. He fell on the ground with his head bowed to offer obeisances unto the lotus feet of the Lord. His heart, naturally full of love of God, with folded hands, his heart, naturally full of love of God, with folded hands, he satisfied the Lord with prayers. The great sage Kardama said, O supreme worshipable Lord, my power of sight is now fulfilled, having attained the greatest perfection of the sight of you, who are the reservoir of all existences. Through many successful Through many successive births of deep meditation, advanced yogis aspire to see your transcendental form. Your lotus feet are the true vessel to take one across the ocean of mundane nescience. Only persons deprived of their intelligence by the spell of the deluding energy will worship those feet with a view to attain the trivial and momentary pleasures of the senses, which even people rotting in hell can attain. However, O my Lord, you're so kind that you bestow mercy even upon them. Hare Krishna.
Therefore, desiring to marry a girl of like disposition, who may prove to be a veritable cow of plenty in my married life, to satisfy my lusty desire, I too have sought the shelter of your lotus feet, which are the source of everything, for you are like a desire tree. O my Lord, you are the master and the leader of all living entities. Under your direction, all conditioned souls, as if bound by a rope, are constantly engaged in satisfying their desires. Following them, O embodiment of religion, I also bear oblations for you, who are eternal time. However, persons who have given up stereotyped worldly affairs and the beastly followers of these affairs, and who have taken shelter of the umbrella of your lotus feet by drinking the intoxicating nectar of your qualities and activities in discussions with one another, can be freed from the primary necessities of the material body. Your wheel, which has three naves, rotates around the axis of the imperishable Brahman. It has 13 spokes, 360 joints, 6 rims, and numberless leaves carved upon it. Though its revolution cuts short the lifespan of the entire creation, this wheel of tremendous velocity cannot touch the lifespan of the devotees of the Lord. My dear Lord, you alone create the universes. O personality of Godhead, desiring to create these universes, you create them, maintain them, and again wind them up by your own energies, which are under the control of your second energy called Yoga Maya. Just as a spider creates a cobweb by its own energy and again winds it up. My dear Lord, although it is not your desire, you manifest this creation of gross and subtle elements just for our sensual satisfaction. Let your causeless mercy be upon us, for you have appeared before us in your eternal form, adorned with a splendid wreath of tulsi leaves. I continuously offer my respectful obeisances unto your lotus feet, of which it is worthy to take shelter, because you shower all benedictions on the insignificant. To give all living entities detachment from fruitive activity by realizing you, you have expanded these material worlds by your own energy. Maitreya resumed. Sincerely extolled in these words, Lord Vishnu, shining very beautifully on the shoulders of Garuda, replied with words as sweet as nectar. His eyebrows moved gracefully as he looked at the sage with a smile full of affection. The Supreme Lord said, having come to know what was in your mind, I have already arranged for that which you have worshipped me well through your mental and sensory discipline. The Lord continued, my dear Rishi, O leader of all living entities, for those who serve me in devotion by worshipping me, especially persons like you who have given up everything unto me, there is never any question of frustration. The Emperor Swayambhuva Manu, the son of Lord Brahma, who is well known for his righteous acts, has his seat in Brahmavarta and rules over the earth with his 7 oceans. The day after tomorrow, O Brahmana, that celebrated emperor, who is expert in religious activities, will come here with his queen, Satarupa, wishing to see you. Hare Krishna.
Two more verses, Mataji.
Oh, sir, yes. Sorry. Um, he has grown up daughter whose eyes are black. She is ready for marriage and she has good character and all good qualities. She is also searching for a good husband, my dear sir. Her parents will come to see you, who are exactly suitable for her, just to deliver their daughter as your wife. Just to deliver their daughter as your wife. That princess, holy sage, will be just the type you've been thinking in your heart for all these long years. She will soon be yours and will serve you to your heart's content. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Soham Prabhu, followed
Yes.
by Vishal Prakash.
Till where, Prabhu? She will bring forth 9 daughters from the seed sown in her by you, and through the daughters you beget, the sages will duly beget children. With your heart cleansed by properly carrying out my command, resigning to me the fruits of all your acts, you will finally attain to me. Showing compassion to all living entities, you will attain self realization. Giving assurance of safety to all, you will perceive your own self as well as all the universes in me and myself in you. O great sage, I shall manifest my own plenary portion through your wife, Devahuti, along with your 9 daughters, and I shall instruct her in the system of philosophy that deals with the ultimate principles or categories. Maitreya went on, thus having spoken to Kardama Muni, the Lord who reveals himself only when the senses are in Krishna consciousness, departed from that lake called Bindu Sarovar, which was encircled by the river Saraswati. While the sage stood looking on, the Lord left by the pathway leading to Vaikuntha, a path extolled by all great liberated souls. The sage stood listening as the hymns forming the basis of the Samaveda were vibrated by the flapping wings of the Lord's carrier Garuda. Then, after the departure of the Lord, the worshipful sage Kardama stayed on the bank of Bindu Sarovar, awaiting the time of which the Lord had spoken. Swayambhuva Manu with his wife mounted his chariot, which was decorated with golden ornaments. Placing his daughter on it with them, he began traveling all over the earth. O Vidura, they reached the hermitage of the sage, who had just completed his vows of austerity on the very day foretold by the Lord. The holy lake Bindu Sarovar, flooded by the waters of the river Saraswati, was resorted to by hosts of eminent sages. Its holy waters was not only auspicious but as sweet as nectar. It was called Bindu Sarovar because drops of tears had fallen there from the eyes of the Lord, who was overwhelmed by extreme compassion for the sage who had sought his protection. The shore of the lake was surrounded by clusters of pious trees and creepers, rich in fruits and flowers of all seasons, that afforded shelter to pious animals and birds, which uttered various cries. It was adorned by the beauty of groves of forest trees. The area resounded with the notes of overjoyed birds. Intoxicated bees wandered there, intoxicated peacocks proudly danced, and merry cuckoos called one another. Like Bindu Sarovar was adorned by flowering trees such as Kadamba, Champaka, Ashoka, Karanja, Bakula, Asana, Kunda, Mandara, Kutaja, and young mango trees. The air was filled with the pleasing notes of Karandava ducks, plavas, swans, ospreys, waterfowl, cranes, chakravakas, and chakoras. Its shores abounded. Okay.
Vishal Prabhu, you can complete the chapter.
Its shores abounded with deers, boars, porcupines, gavayas, elephants, baboons, lions, monkeys, mongooses, and musk deer. Entering the most sacred spot with his daughter and going near the sage, the first monarch, Swayambhuva Manu, saw the sage sitting in the hermitage having just propitiated the sacred fire by pouring oblations into it. His body shone most brilliantly. Though he had engaged in austere penance for a long time, he was not emaciated, for the Lord had cast his affectionate sidelong glance upon him, and he had also heard the nectar flowing from the moon-like words of the Lord. The sage was tall, his eyes were large, like the petals of a lotus, and he had matted locks on his head. He was clad in rags. Swayambhuva Manu approached and saw him to be somewhat soiled, like an unpolished gem. Seeing that the monarch had come to his hermitage and was bowing before him, the sage greeted him with benediction and received him with due honor. After receiving the sage's attention, the king sat down and was silent. Recalling the instructions of the Lord, Kardama then spoke to the king as follows, delighting him with his sweet accents. The tour you have undertaken, O Lord, is surely intended to protect the virtues and kill the demons, since you embody the protecting energy of Srihari. When necessary, you assume the part of the sun god, the moon god, Agni, the god of fire, Indra, the lord of paradise, Vayu, the wind god, Vayu, the wind god, Yama, the god of punishment, Dharma, the god of piety, and Varuna, the god presiding over the waters. All obeisances to you, who are none other than Lord Vishnu. If you did not mount your victorious jeweled chariot, whose mere presence threatens culprits, if you did not produce fierce sounds by the twanging of your bow, and if you did not roam around the world like the brilliant sun, leading a huge army whose trampling feet cause the globe of the earth to tremble, then all the moral laws governing the varnas and ashramas created by the Lord himself would be broken by the rogues and rascals. If you gave up all thought of the world situation, unrighteousness would flourish, for men who hanker only after money would be unopposed. Such miscreants would attack and the world would perish. In spite of all this, I ask you, O valiant king, the purpose for which you have come here, whatever it may be, we shall carry it on without reservation. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you, dear readers. So, this is a very nice chapter, and one thing that Prabhupada's purports for this chapter are very beautiful. And I felt very much nourished by going through these purports. Many things Prabhupada talks about. So anyway, we'll go into the themes also one by one, but I just wanted to point out some very nice purports in this chapter. So before that, there is this Prabhupada writes in various purports about devotional service. So this Kardama Muni, he was actually performing meditation and austerities for several thousand years actually. So Prabhupada writes there that he was performing these meditations and austerities, but they were not devoid of bhakti. So because this was Satya Yuga, that was the prescribed process. Kritaya dhyayato Vishnum tretayam yajito makhai dvapare paricharyayam kalau tad hari kirtanat. So the prescribed process for God realization in Satya Yuga was meditation on Lord Vishnu, right? So what was the prescribed process for Treta Yuga? Anyone can put in the chat or what was the process? Yajna, yes. Tretayam yajito makhai. Then what about Dwapar Yuga? DT worship. Yes, thank you, Ritesh Prabhu, Nandini Mataji. And then Kali Yuga is, of course, we know, Kalautad Hari Kirtanat. So Hari Kirtan is the prescribed process for God realization in the age of Kali. Now, I had this question, a few years ago that how can meditation be, a prescribed form of worship to the Lord in Satya Yuga? And Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, he answers this question. He says that actually, so is it bhakti yoga? Is meditation bhakti yoga? So he answers that all these processes actually, all the four yoga processes, be it meditation, be it yajna, be it deity worship, everything is bhakti actually. But then the way you express that bhakti to the Lord is different in different yugas. And that difference comes because of the abilities of the people in that yuga and various other factors, the favorable conditions that are there for practicing spiritual life and whatnot. So it's like a doctor prescribes medicines as per the ability of the patient to take those medicines. So similarly, different yugas have different processes prescribed. And Kali Yuga, it's if we compare with the processes of the other yugas, it's actually the easiest. Just by chanting the holy names of the Lord, we can go back to Godhead actually. And of course, there is one reflection here. I had written one article on this topic of how, in Kali Yuga we get a discount on the process of self-realization. And one of the reviews that I had gotten from one of the authors is that actually this comparison you're making is not relevant, because he was saying that if you compare the chanting of the holy names, 16 rounds and whatnot, whatever requirements we have in ISKCON, if you compare that with the other processes in Kali Yuga today, then actually ours is a very demanding process. So he said that comparison with the processes of other yugas is not exactly relevant in the present day and age, and ours is actually quite demanding. So it requires a lot of time and effort on a daily basis. But in any case, we do have a lot of concession, and just by chanting the holy name, we don't have to do any kind of austerity and things like that. We'll go back to Godhead, is what it said in Kali Yuga. So, and Prabhupada quotes this verse also a lot in the purport. Harer Nama, Harer Nama Iva Kevalam, Kallo Nasti Eva, Nasti Eva, Nasti Eva Gatiranyata. So that three times Nasti Eva is one Nasti Eva for meditation, one Nasti Eva for yajna, and one Nasti Eva for deity worship. Nasteva, 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 Gatiranyatha. So none of these will help. The only thing that will help is the holy names of the Lord. Of course, to regulate our bhakti, to regulate our lifestyles, to make our minds peaceful, to practice chanting in the best possible way, we do engage in these other processes. We do yajnas. It's not that we don't do yajnas. When there is a marriage ceremony, when there is an initiation ceremony, or anything, baby shower, this and that. So we do yajnas, right? Similarly, we do deity worship. Deity worship is considered very, very important for everyone in bhakti. But that these things are meant to make our minds more peaceful, so that when we sit to chant the holy names of the Lord, we can take complete shelter of the holy names of the Lord and chant. So like that. So anyway, Prabhupada also talks about how even the process of Hatha Yoga, even the process of Ashtanga Yoga, the final aim of that process is to witness the Lord in the heart, to ultimately graduate to bhakti, and that is the process that is given in the sixth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, so which is known as Yoga Mission Bhakti. So anyway, so that was one theme, and this there are some purports. As I said, I'll mention some purports. So we'll take a look at some purports which are really nice. So one purport which will make all those who all grihasthas very grateful is this is um 28. So the theme here in this chapter, one of the important themes is that Kardama Muni is asking to the Lord for a suitable wife. So, so here Prabhupada writes that only by God's grace can one get a nice wife just as he desires. Similarly, it is only by God's grace that a girl gets a husband suitable to her heart. Thus, it is said that if we pray to the Supreme Lord in every transaction of our material existence, everything will be done very nicely and just suitable to our heart's desire. So, in other words, in all circumstances, we must take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and depend completely on his decision. Man proposes, God disposes. So, like this, Prabhupada continues to write a lot about, how marriages happen and how it is actually the Lord's desire that the kind of wife we get, even the kind of children we have, That's actually a lot of daiva is involved, a lot of destiny is involved in that process. So anyway, that is one nice purport, and another very nice purport, and it's a very long purport, is this 31. So in this 31 purport to the verse 31, Prabhupada talks about so many things, so many things. And one of the things that I wanted to cover here, I know many of you know this, but just it's good to revise. So there are three levels of devotees, as per Madhurya Kadambini, I think so, or I think Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu. I don't know the exact scripture where it is said, but there are three levels of devotees: Kanishta, Madhyama, and Uttam Adhikari. So Kanishta Adhikari. So Prabhupada says here that it is also said that a person who goes to the temple of the Lord and worships with great devotion, but who does not show sympathy to people in general or show respect to other devotees, is considered to be a third class devotee or a Kanishta Adhikari. The second class devotee is he who is merciful and compassionate to the fallen soul. The second class devotee is always cognizant of his position as an eternal servant of the Lord. He therefore makes friendships with the devotees of the Lord, acts compassionately toward the general public in teaching them devotional service, and refuses to cooperate or associate with non devotees. As long as one is not compassionate to people in general in his devotional service to the Lord, he is a third class devotee. So this is what Prabhupada writes. So he's making a clear distinction between a Kanishta and a Madhyama Adhikari. So Kanishta Adhikari is only, the Lord is only in the picture, right? But then a Madhyama Adhikari is a little further in the evolutionary process where he or she understands that, okay, if the Lord is dear to me, then those who are dear to the Lord are also dear to me, like that. And everybody is dear to the Lord. There is no one that is not dear to the Lord, right? Because Lord is Aham Bija Pradhapita. He's the seed-giving father and a loving father to everyone, each and every living entity. And then finally, Prabhupada writes here, the first-class devotee gives assurance to every living being that there is no fear of this material existence. Let us live in Krishna consciousness and conquer the nescience of material existence. So this is what a first-class devotee is. Prabhupada doesn't write much about an Uttamadhikari, but what I have read and known is that an Uttamadhikari is somebody who is completely convinced of the message of the Lord, and they have the ability to convince others of the message of the Lord as well, and they are completely self-realized. So those are Uttamadhikaris, and like it is said, Prabhupada was an Uttamadhikari, right? And one thing that is also said is that an Uttamadhikari, they are so detached from the world. One of the things that the one aspect of the Uttamadhikari is that they are so attached to the Lord in pure loving devotion that they are completely detached from material existence completely. Like they don't have anything to give or take with the material world. So they are completely, totally. And the thing is, they are so in love of Krishna that they see even a non-devotee to be a devotee of Krishna. That is their vision. That's how pure their vision is. They don't see anybody as being antagonistic or disconnected from Krishna. They see everybody, everything, and everybody connected to Krishna. So that is the Uttam Adhikari. They, very high level of pure devotional service, the Uttam Adhikari. And it is said that, but now if an Uttam Adhikari sees everybody as being connected to Krishna, everybody as a pure devotee of Krishna, then how will he or she preach? Right? So it is said that an Uttam Adhikari actually has to come down to the platform of Madhyam Adhikari in order to preach to the Lord, because in preach about the Lord to the souls who are disconnected from the Lord. Because if one is in the Madhyam Adhikari, one of the aspects of Madhyam Adhikari is that they differentiate. They differentiate between devotees and non-devotees, and they make sure that they don't get influenced too much by non-devotees. So like that, and at the same time, they try to preach to the non-devotees. So an Uttam Adhikari, who is actually so pure that he or she sees everybody connected to Krishna, has to come to that level to make that discrimination between a devotee and non-devotee and then preach accordingly. So that is something that is nice here that came. And this is just theory, and it does have practical ramifications in our devotional life as well, but we'll not get into that today. And then Prabhupada later talks about many things in this purport, like the duty of a sannyasi, the duty of a householder, and so many things. Yeah, so a person who is a householder but is initiated by a sannyasi has the duty to spread Krishna consciousness at home as far as possible. He should call his friends and neighbors to his house and hold classes in Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada is being really specific here, which is very interesting. Holding a class. So he tells what does holding a class means. Holding a class means chanting the holy name of Krishna and speaking from the Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam. There are immense literatures for spreading KC, and it is a duty of each and every householder to learn about Krishna from his sannyasi spiritual master. So, in this way, Prabhupada writes very beautiful things about the duties of a householder, duties of a sannyasi. But in any case, let's move on to the themes, right, in this chapter. So, one of the things that we'll see in this chapter is like an apparent contradiction. Before we get into that, I was reflecting on this desire of Kardama Muni to get a wife, right? So there are, dependence on the Lord. That we may think of dependence on the Lord in many ways, right? So I was thinking there are two ways we could think of two types of dependence on the Lord, right? So one type of dependence on the Lord is I will not ask the Lord for anything I want, right? I want to be detached from my own selfish desire, so I'll not ask the Lord for anything that I want, right? Why should I bother the Lord for something that I need, something that I want, some material desire that I have for myself? I'll not do that. But then another level of dependence, another type of dependence, I was reflecting on this, is that I will not ask anyone but the Lord for anything I want. So this is also a dependence on the Lord, although we are asking for something, but we are depending on the Lord for it. So I feel both these things are actually dependence. They are actually genuine forms of dependence on the Lord. So yeah, I don't know if anyone has any points here, and we'll see how Kardama Muni actually fits in the second category here. So yeah.
Hare
Your
Krishna.
second point is brilliant, Prabhu. I will not ask anything but the Lord for anything I want. And the first one also, I will not ask the Lord for anything I want. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how you have added those few words in between to make these two powerful phrases. Thank you for sharing this. Brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Krishna Prabhu. Yes.
So even after the Arthi Artharthi Jigyasunyani verse,
Mm-hmm.
the after that verse, the Lord says that all of them are dear to me.
Correct.
So the person who asks only from the Lord, at least he's completely dependent on the Lord.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
And that's why he's and he knows that the Lord is the ultimate giver.
Correct.
So that knowledge is there, and hence they're they are dear to the Lord.
Correct. Yeah, no, definitely, Prabhu. Thank you for pointing that out. So yes, Krishna says that, Chaturvida bhajante mam jana sukritino Arjuna. Then actually he says a bunch of things there. So he says after that, artho jidnyasur arthati jnani cha bharatarshaba. The next verse actually says tesham jnani nityuktah eka bhaktir vishishyate priyo hi jnani notyartham aham sachamama priya. So what he says is among these four, the jnani, or one who is in search of the absolute truth, right, in knowledge, he is most dear to me, he says. Okay, but that doesn't end there. And then devotees have, acharyas have analyzed on about why the Lord says that. Why does he say that the one in search of the absolute truth in knowledge is dearer to him? Because the other three categories, there are pros and cons. The pro is, of course, that the other three categories are coming to the Lord for whatever they are seeking. But then the flip side is that, like, for example, a distressed person, right? If a distressed person comes to the Lord and because of the Lord's mercy, the distress goes away, then there is a slight chance that the previously distressed person can use their free will to go away from the Lord. अभी तो काम हो गया ना, अभी क्यों आना है मंदिर को, like that. So similarly with the desirer of wealth, and similarly with the the inquisitive, inquisitive people. Yeah, what are these? ये मस्त नाचते हैं ये लोग, क्या कर रहे हैं? I should go and see. And they'll go and see, and then, yeah, okay, fine, they are Krishna devotees and whatever, and they might just come back and never go back to the temple. There is that possibility. But then the beauty of the thing is that if they still keep going, if they just make that choice of continuing, then the Lord will purify them. The Lord will purify them and then bring them to the platform of bhakti, bring them to the platform of the jnani, eka bhakti, eka bhaktir vishishyate. So anyway, that is, and then this is the 16th, and then the 17th verse again, Krishna says, Udaraha sarva evaite. Udaraha sarva evaite. All these are magnanimous souls, he says. All these four categories are magnanimous souls. So, which is also very interesting, which goes back to the point that Krishna is yearning. On one hand, he is the Atmaram, Atmaramascha Munayo. He is self-satisfied. He doesn't need anything. But on the other hand, he's yearning for the love of all his souls who are like his children. He's yearning for that. It's like an Achintya Bheda Bhed. He's self-satisfied on one end, but at the same time, he's yearning for our love. So that is why, because he's yearning for our love, even if somebody goes with an intention of getting something from the Lord, still the Lord the Lord loves that actually. He calls such souls as magnanimous. So yeah, thank you for bringing that point, Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Wonderful explanation. You just brought new light to these verses for me.
Correct. Thank you, Prabhu. Any other thoughts on this, dear devotees?
I was just contemplating on these two statements that you put, Prabhu, and I was thinking that the mood with which one prays, one takes these positions is also something to be considered. I'm thinking. For example, in the first one, I will not ask the Lord for anything I want because the Lord knows what I want, or something like, uh, the feeling behind the statements or these convictions is also something that's important. Uh, because if you think that, okay, I'm not going to ask anything, it's uh, because I'm an advanced soul,
Yeah,
or something like that, or I'm not going to ask anything because the Lord knows what I want. Why should I ask?
right.
So that mood. And also second one is I will not ask anyone but the Lord for anything I want. It could also be that, okay, I'm I don't care about anybody else. Just me and Lord, that's it. That attitude also, I just wanted to see.
Beautiful, Mataji. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. I'll definitely add this in my notes. Surely, this is such valuable factors. Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for pointing that out. As you mentioned, that the first statement can be done out of pride also. That, oh, I'm so detached. I'm not asking the Lord for anything.
Yeah, it could both could be subtle.
Yes,
Could be
yes.
started with good intention, but it could be subtly turning into these, because
Correct,
you
correct.
may not even realize.
Yeah, and there is this lecture series by Maharaj. It's Don't Be a Spoilt Brat. It's actually a lecture series. Either it's a lecture series or one lecture. Don't be a spoiled brat. And spoiled in that, Maharaj, I still remember hearing that class. Maharaj says, Lord, give me this, Lord, give me that, Lord, ye chahiye, wo chahiye. Of course, Maharaj doesn't say it in Hindi, but that is the point that Maharaj is trying to convey. We shouldn't be spoiled brats. So if the second thing is in that, from that perspective, then definitely that's not the ideal state.
Oh, that's also a beautiful one. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because we cannot be like, like 5-year-old kids going to
Yeah.
mom for everything.
Yes,
Like that.
yes.
Yeah. I mean,
And
it's
yeah.
nothing wrong with it, but I guess, um,
Mm.
yeah, it makes one not do the effort that is required
Exactly.
from it. Yeah, it becomes like a spoiled brat, like Maharaj says.
Yeah, yeah, very nice. And there is this another subtle point that, it sometimes asking the Lord, as you said, it does not mean we don't try, or does not mean we don't use the frameworks given by the Lord in the world. So it we still make use of that, but it's more subtle, it's more internal in the sense that I may be, let's say, going to a doctor for an illness, but then internally, whom am I depending on? Who am I depending on? So that also matters. So yeah, it's so many things, internal, external, even within internal, what is the mood? Is it out of pride, or is it out of the tendency to just be a spoiled, brat? I don't know, spoiled brat is very strong, is a strong term. I don't want to keep using it, but yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there is also, yeah. I mean, the thing is that it's also very dangerous. That I was just discussing this yesterday or day before with Gautama Prabhu, that our request to the Lord could easily become expectations,
Mm.
and it is just a very slippery slope. We think that, okay, I'm just praying, even though I may pray that um I'm praying for this, Lord, but I know that I accept whatever you give me, because it's your will, best for me, all that. But then underlying there is a, an expectation that the Lord must fulfill my
Yeah.
prayer, and then when anything short of that, the disappointment comes, and then we go into this whole downward spiral of lose all the way up to maybe the point of even losing faith, and then finally finding our way back to to the yeah
Yeah,
to
very true,
bring
Mataji.
it's yeah, it's very there's many facets to this.
Many facets.
Yeah.
For sure, for
I
sure.
just have one point, Prabhu. I don't know if you have a lot of things to cover, but
Oh, please, please, Prabhu, go ahead.
so I was listening to Wisdom of the Sages. Maybe Krishnan Prabhu must have also heard recently. Kastuba Prabhu mentions there from Anand Vrindavan Champu. He was actually reading a pastime from Anand Vrindavan Champu. And then there actually Krishna makes a very beautiful statement. He says that when my devotee is suffering or when my devotee is hurt, I also go through the same suffering with my devotee.
Hmm.
So now then the question comes, why can't Krishna solve the suffering of that devotee? Do you know why? So the reason that, I mean, we're talking about pure devotee here. And so the reason that is mentioned by Kavi Karnapur, who's the author of Anand Chapo, in that book, he mentions that the reason is because the devotee will never ask the Lord to remove that suffering. Just like in the case of Gajendra also, Gajendra never said, as Gaushan Prabhu also mentioned, he never asked the Lord to relieve him of the suffering from the crocodile. Of course, he asked the Lord to like completely come out of the veil of this material world, like come out of this material world, but he never once asked the Lord to remove the suffering that he's going through. So that's why Krishna says that when my devotee is suffering, I cry with that devotee because I know that the devotee will never ask anything on his behalf from me. So I thought that I really liked these 2 points because of that reason. I will not ask the Lord for anything I want. So that is the heart of a pure devotee. Of course, as Nitya mentioned, the mood is also very important. Of course, the devotee doesn't want to trouble the Lord and he has so much love for the Lord. And he has the faith also that whatever I'm going through is because of my karma. So why bother the Lord to remove that? Let me go through my suffering and be done with it and just go back to Him. Yeah, just wanted to share that. Sorry. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. That was so beautiful. Really. Yeah.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. I was attending a class by Gaur Sharan Prabhu, and thank you so much for sharing that, Gaur Kumar Prabhu. That was really beautiful. I was attending a class by Gaur Sharan Prabhu, and I asked him this question about, if we don't ask, uh, Lord Krishna, then who will we ask? And what do we do when we are not, we are not like the perfect devotee that you're describing, where
Yes.
so what do we do? And he said that it's
At our
perfectly fine to ask,
yeah.
and and he said Lord Narsingadev
Mm-hmm.
is whom we should ask.
Mm.
Um, and it's totally fine to ask. And and as devotees get more and more advanced, they will ask Lord Krishna for pure love. And
Yes.
but when for our needs, for our material needs, it's perfectly okay to ask Lord Nrsingadev.
Oh, very interesting, Prabhu. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And one more thing I just want to add is that at our level, I think, yeah, it's better to ask the Lord and connect with the Lord that way than not to ask the Lord and be impersonal also. So at our level, I mean, the example that I gave was for pure devotees, but at our level, it's okay to ask the Lord. At least there we are making a connection with Krishna. So yeah, thank you.
That's very nice actually. Yeah. Chaitanya Chand Prabhu says in order to have a loving connection with the Lord, there has to be a connection in the first place. So yeah. So yeah, we should ask if there is something that is bothering us. We should definitely. Yeah, thank you. So many valuable points. I'm so in awe of hearing these points. I'll go back and hear these again actually from the recording. Thank you very much. So moving on, so we'll see how Kardam Muni fits into one of these categories, right? So there is an apparent contradiction. It's an apparent contradiction, not like a real contradiction in Kardama Muni's words actually, and they point to his humility in a way. So in text 14, when he begins his prayers to the Lord, he says, "Your lotus feet are the true vessel."